Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And we are here tonight to talk to you more about the conversation tonight. First, apologies. This is the Elimu Care platform where we are running this campaign. Yes. And so we are here tonight at exactly 7 p.m. East Africa time to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on gender-based violence. Apologies, the host who was to take the show is unwell, and because of that, I step in. I'll be your host for tonight, Cleophas Oluoch. And my guest tonight is one lady I'll be adding to the stream. So meanwhile, you can just be telling me where you're tuning in from, and you tell us where are you listening or joining us live from. This is Elimu Care in partnership with Connexus, and we are here to talk more about gender-based violence. How can we bring our ideas together to ensure that this vice ends in our society? So our guest tonight is here with us, and I'll be adding her in the stream in a few. Yes, and here she is. Our guest tonight is Nimer Kassim, founder of the Hijab Mentorship, and she's here to talk to us about this great discussion that we are having, and that's impact of COVID-19 on gender-based violence. So karibu sana Nimer Kassim, and so tueleze Nimer Kassim ni nani kabla hatujaanza mazungumzo yetu rasmi. Karibu.
Asante sana, Cleophas. So my name is Nimer Nzani Kassim Zani, and I'm just smiling at how the word Nimer has been written on the tagline with an ER. That's my Instagram name. Yeah, so
Right.
my name
Should
is
be.
Nimer with a AH actually. Nimer Nzani Zani, and I'm the founder of the Hijabi Mentorship Program. So, the Hijabi Mentorship Program is a community based organization that is located in Kwale County. We work in championing for development in underserved communities with a specific focus on gender equality. And when I say in gender equality, I'm talking about sexual reproductive health and rights, gender based violence, peace and conflict resolution, and also economic empowerment. But most of our work is focusing on women and young people, specifically women in underserved communities. And our work is also in line with the three coalition themes of the generation equality. So I'm really happy to be here, especially at this moment, because currently we are working on a project in championing for the generation equality. It's a 12-month project that we were funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We were part of the 10 organizations globally that were selected for this particular grant. And the theme of our grant is addressing sexual, reproductive, and health and gender based violence in underserved communities. So I was pretty much very excited when I received this invitation from Elimu Care, and I'm so happy. I was really happy actually when I saw that you were working towards gender-based violence, considering how much of a sensitive issue it is in our communities, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Cleophas.
Thank you so much, Nimer, for that elaborate explanation of what you do, and you being an enthusiast when it comes to gender-based issues in the society. This is the right and timely discussion for us to step into the discussion tonight, and that's the impact of COVID-19 on gender-based violence. We all have come to realize with the issue of everyone being at home and everyone trying to find a means to survive, and lockdown brought people back to stay at home as families. It brought in so many things: child abuse and family issues. Gender-based violence went on the rise. On your end, if we can just get your take. What's the status currently in the country, or in your community in Kenya currently where you live, as far as gender-based violence is concerned?
So if I'm being completely honest, I'm going to speak for Kwale County, and there's been a surge. Okay, there's been an increase in the rising cases of gender-based violence. In fact, what I'd say is we've seen new trends and patterns of gender-based violence that initially we hadn't realized, or rather, I'd say initially were not there. Um, so of course, there's the issue of we've seen a lot of sexual exploitation for young girls going to school. I don't know if you recently saw in the news that about 300,000 young girls in school could not go back to school after the lockdown due to teenage pregnancy. Or, some of them got married along the run. So there is that, which is quite common actually in Kwale, unfortunately. But then there were other new cases where we learned due to people staying at home, because we had the lockdown, so family was staying at home. We had an increase in family violence, and in fact, it went worse to a point where gender-based violence was happening in the household. So there was this new trend that was happening late last year, carrying forward to earlier this year, where we'd see that apparently, allegedly, because we come from a very superstitious community. So apparently, it was a new trend where if you're a witch and you sleep with your daughter or you sleep with your granddaughter, then you become a more powerful witch. Apparently, it's a thing amongst the witches. So we realized that there was a lot of GBV that was happening at home, um, for with people trying to gain more power in the community, or gain more money. So there were different issues that have been rising, and I'd say there's been a surge. In fact, I think during COVID-19 is when the government actually provided us with our first rescue center in Kwale County. We currently have a rescue center in Kwale County that is at Kwale Hospital. So, so yeah, the cases have really increased, and even when speaking to other rescue centers around the county, that not for the government, because that one is the one that was opened by the government officially, but the ones that don't belong to the government, they have also mentioned that they've been having higher numbers and higher cases of young girls, young women, or young people, but most of them specifically focus on women. So young people who have had to be registered in their centers for protection or to provide them with safe spaces. So if you ask me, I'd say there's been a surge, unfortunately, and the rise is very alarming in our county and in our community.
And so, Nima, with all these institutions coming up to talk against gender-based violence in our society, and you are championing for this in your program that you're running at the Hijabi mentorship, if I get that right. And so,
Yeah.
in your passion and in that drive to ensure that this is achieved, what are some of the risks and vulnerabilities that come alongside these gender-based violence, especially during this time that we are in COVID-19 pandemic?
So I'm trying to get you correctly, for my sake and for the sake of the audience. So do you mean the risks we go through as champions against gender-based violence, or the risks that victims are facing? I just
The
want to
victims
be sure.
and those people who might be in a position to face gender-based violence, what are some of the risks that they are likely, or the vulnerabilities, the gaps that are there that is promoting this gender-based violence in the society now in a pandemic?
Okay. So I'd say the first vulnerability point would be poverty, economic vulnerability, because when you look at the statistics for family violence and the reasons that family violence is actually happening and the reason that family violence has been normalized, you're going to realize that this is because most of the victims feel helpless. Most of the victims feel like they don't have a way out of a horrible marriage. They don't have a way out of a horrible relationship. So they'd rather stay in this horrible situation simply because they're afraid of how the world looks like out there, especially with all the issues of unemployment in Kenya and all the complaints that we've been seeing recently. Hakuna pesa, there is no money. Everyone is talking about there is no money. I don't think you remember. I don't know. I think everyone does remember the situation that happened last year where there was this widow who was um, cooking, I'd say boiling stones just to feed their
Boiling
children.
stones.
Yeah,
Yes.
boiling stones to feed their children. And it was a very unfortunate scenario. So I think most of the victims are just scared of stepping out of this comfort zone, and they feel like, you know what, I'd rather stay in this horrible marriage just so I can be able to take care of my children, just so I can be able to feed my family, just so I can be able to eat. And even when you listen to the stories of these young girls who get into forced marriages, some of them refuse to go back to their families because some of them will tell you, I can't go home. Like when I go home, I can't even eat meat. I don't even eat meat. At least when I'm here with this old man, I eat meat. At least when I'm here with this old man, I drink milk. I don't have that at home because we're probably 12 children. So for me and you listening to this is just another story, right? Because we are looking at this from a position of privilege. These are very common things. Somebody somewhere would be like, just milk, just meat. But that is a big deal for someone who has never had that opportunity. So for me, I'd say the first vulnerability will be economic or financial sustainability, or yeah, job opportunities. Another vulnerability I talk about is culture, especially in our community. These are conversations that are rarely had, which is one of the reasons that inspired us to start this program, because we felt like we cannot keep talking about this is a sensitive issue. We can talk about this, but then other young people, other young women are suffering because they're told that they shouldn't air out their thoughts. I believe that women need to be able to speak before they can shout. Okay. So before we go out in the streets protesting, I need to feel safe to come on a platform and just talk about the issues that are happening to me without being judged or facing any form of stigmatization or being shunned from my society and being told, Mwachamila Nutuma, these are topics that shouldn't be discussed. These are taboo topics. So there is the issue of not having a safe space to air out your thoughts, and which also narrows it down to, psychological violence, because that has become very popular at the moment. There's a lot of this, I'd say it's mental health crisis. And this is,
Yeah.
as a result of having to put things in your heart, having to put things in your mind and not being allowed to speak about issues that are clearly burdening you. And I remember last year we were having a conversation. We had a campaign with my team, and we would talk about a divorced daughter is better than a dead daughter, because we saw so many mothers, forcing their children, parents actually forcing their children to stay into abusive marriages because they felt like, leaving that marriage is worse than them being beaten. So it also came down to, you if you can't even speak to your own mom and share with her your fears, if you can't speak to your own sister to tell them about the issues, that the trauma that you're facing in your marriage, or the trauma that you're facing in your house, then what kind of society are we living in? So as you can see, safe spaces is also a big problem. And I think I forgot to mention, when it comes to financial vulnerability, how our young girls are being exploited by elder men to sleep with them, or give something in return just so that they can get something as small as pads, something as small as panties. Because I remember we were in a particular village, and the young girls were telling us, because we had taken pads, and they said, giving us pads, but we don't even have panties. Where are we supposed to put these pads on? And honestly, for me, that was a shock, because, again, it was a reminder of the privilege that we have. You just sit down and say, oh, we've seen this community, we're just going to take them a bunch of pads. They probably need it, but then you really don't know what they need more. So, financial vulnerability will always be the topmost safe spaces. And another issue would be inadequate facilities. I don't know. I feel like there is a shortage of facilities where victims and survivors of GBV can go to seek help. But I think that maybe could come into later into the discussion. But those are the issues that I found primarily as a what is causing gender-based violence are the issues that are facing GBV victims in our communities.
Great insights from you, Nima. And if I can confirm, or in your pursuit to ensure that these girls who are in such kind of engagements, it can be with the planned engagements or others that they just find themselves in, and you trying in to help. We have those who are tuning in from YouTube, from Facebook, and they have great feedback from the work that you're doing in trying to combat the issue of gender-based violence as well in your program. But now there is one main concern when you talk about gender-based violence, and these people who are there, who are in it, those who are the perpetrators are there, then there are these ladies who are involved, or even the
You
gentlemen
mean
who are,
the victims or the survivors? That's what you mean
yes,
by
yes,
ladies who are involved.
yes. So
Uh-huh.
if they're involved in such a scenario, should someone walk out, or should you go an extra mile to seek some help, or what happens in such cases? And if someone fails to get there, can you be in a position to tell someone to go talk to them so that they can leave?
So, when you're dealing with issues of victims of gender-based violence, it's a very sensitive issue. In fact, for us, we prefer if they come to us. We find it very hard for us to go to them and tell them, hey, like it's really hard for me to come to you and say, Cleophas, I think you're going through gender based violence and I think you need to leave your husband now. Because trust me, the response could be horrible. Some people could literally gang up on you and say, oh, she wants to destroy my marriage, probably because she's not even married yet. Oh, she's a horrible woman. Or they can even start putting hatuachani WhatsApp status
Yes,
on their WhatsApp status.
another percent
All
that
of a sudden you
they
become
don't
a
want
hater.
they don't want you to
Exactly.
prosper in your marriage.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes very hard. So for us, we prefer if they come to us. And each time a GBV victim comes to us, we have to be to 100. She has to be 100% sure that she wants to step out of the marriage, and so they have to go through therapy for them to be sure that they really want to do this. Because the last thing we want is to help someone through a process, and then the next thing you know, we're using resources, we're using time, we're using money, we're using energy. Then she goes right back into the arms of the perpetrator. So they have to go through a therapy session to be sure that they truly want to come out of this situation. And then after that, we have to come up with a safety plan, okay? Because, leaving this kind of situation sometimes is a matter of life and death. And,
Yes,
a lot of people are at risk. The victim is at risk. My team is at risk because, the husband may just decide to come and beat up my team members with, the accusation of you want to take my wife away from me. So there are a lot of risks that are involved. So we have to establish a safety plan, and safety plan is different for every person because everyone's um, abuse is different and unique in their own way. So we have to develop that safety plan that is customized to serve a particular victim and try to come up with a way on how they can, escape. But then another issue that I would say has been a challenge is that yes, you can come up with a safety plan and help this victim escape, but then uh, we also have to we're seeking more resources so we're able to empower them economically because this victim akiondoka pale in that situation they need to have a certain space where they know that after this I can be able to still feed my children. Even if I go I can still be able to take care of my family and be able to take care of myself. um, so I hope that responds to your question, but each victim or survivor needs to have their own safety plan. You need to help them develop their own safety plan that they can use to escape this kind of situation, and they have to be 100% sure that they truly want to leave the situation.
thank you so much, Nima, Kassim. And if you are joining us live on this broadcast this evening, it's 20 minutes past 7 p.m. That's East Africa time, and our guest tonight is one Nima Kassim, founder of the hijab, hey, let me just get it again, the hijab mentorship programs. Thank you very much for joining us in this live broadcast from Facebook. And so we appreciate your feedback. Kindly tell us what you think COVID-19 has impacted on gender-based violence in our society. And we move to the next point with my guest, and I would like to get from you, what are some of the challenges, or how has COVID-19 in this pandemic hindered the communication of such risks and vulnerabilities that you've talked about
Mm.
from the victims to those people who are supposed to help them?
It's honestly been quite a challenging year, and I remember even last year my team and I had to take a break and just take a step back to re-strategize and see how we will be able to create adoptive ways of handling or tackling GBV during COVID-19. And one thing that I'd say was the biggest challenge is, the issue of social distancing and the issue of lockdown. And I know a lot of people out there will say, why don't you just do virtual sessions? And yes, I'm all in for virtual sessions. But then for us it's hard because for us we work with underserved communities. I have to insist on this. Underserved communities. So I'm talking about women and girls who probably don't even own a phone, who've never owned a phone. And if they even own a phone, then it's definitely not a smartphone. And even if they did have a smartphone, then they're located in an area with zero network connection. So do they even have airtime? So all these issues, it becomes really hard to communicate with this kind of a person. And for us, we used to take pride in being able to sit face to face with a victim, to talk to them, understand them, build trust, build a relationship, because they have to trust you. People need to trust you before you can help them. So it's a long process. And shifting that from that to all of a sudden, virtually was really hard for us. And during that time, when the lockdown, when we first had the lockdown, we had to cut short all of our activities. And that was the time we were receiving a lot of requests on, please help us, because the cases have become really more. But with time, I'd say the situation kind of, it hasn't improved, because now I feel like we're really going back to where we started. But right in the middle, there was some improvement, so we could go back to the field again and get to have these conversations with women and other young people who are facing these issues. And now we're back to building a connection. What I'd say right now is we've noticed that we have to fix the gap of communication. So we're even teaching some of the victims that we are working with how to use um, phones, how to send a text message, how to. So basically, we're starting afresh. So it's been quite a challenging year, especially for the sector of gender-based violence and communication to gender-based violence victims. But I don't think we have an option. We just have to figure out a way around it, because COVID is clearly with us to stay for longer than we thought.
Great. COVID is here with us, and we are likely to have it for quite a long time. And thanks so much,
Yeah.
Nimer, Kassim, for these great insights that you're giving us. And it's a lesson to everyone who is joining us live on Facebook. You have a role to play in your society when it comes to communication, to ensure that these messages get to the target individuals, so that you can move from one stage to another. It's a recovery process. And so I would like to get your comments and your feedback also on how you'd like this discussion to continue even beyond this live broadcast that we're having tonight. And so, Nima, if I can get this clear to you, that during this pandemic, there is that service delivery that people do when it comes to gender-based violence, on how they can get these assistance. How how has it been? How is the adapting of GBV service delivery during this pandemic? How has it been so far? Getting them and also
Um,
taking out to them.
mm, I'm trying to think, because I think we've seen a rise and a slope. What I'd say is, when COVID-19 first hit, all the attention went to COVID-19. And I think for a couple of months, everyone forgot about gender based violence because everyone was trying to survive. Even for us, we had to close down the organization and say, you know what, just go home, take care of your family. On the end of the day, we need you alive. If we're going to help the community, then we need you to be alive. And as a founder, I cannot put my staff at risk just because we're trying to change the world. It was for, you have to sit down at some point and say, how much are you willing to lose to make this gain? So I couldn't ask of them what I couldn't, do myself because I live with my older parents and there was no way I was going to put them at a risk because, you don't want to do things that you end up not being able to forgive yourself ever again. So when COVID-19 first hit, I have to acknowledge that everyone started focusing on COVID-19 and people forgot about gender based violence. So even the service delivery just went really low. The safe houses were closed and women no longer had the safe spaces. And even the rescue centers were very skeptical about the people they were letting in because they also didn't want to bring COVID-19 into their rescue centers. So there was that. And then along the way, a couple of months later, everyone realized about the surge in gender-based violence because I think a research was done, and people just noticed just oh wait, so we cannot forget one pandemic because I consider GBV as a pandemic. We cannot forget one pandemic because another one just came up. So what are we going to do? And I saw a lot of PR. To be honest, I saw a lot of PR. I'm not going to go deep in this because I don't want people to think I'm attacking any institution. But there's a lot of PR, people taking pictures, opening centers. But trust me, Cleophas, if you go to some of these centers that were open during that time, you will be surprised because earlier this year, we conducted a baseline survey right before we started this Generation Equality project. And trust me, in some of these centers, unaenda, you just find an intern seated there chatting on his phone. And you wonder how, wait, what? It's very confusing. But people are claiming, and funny thing is a lot of money is being put into some of these centers, but then the delivery and the implementation is what is very discouraging and very disappointing. But I'm really happy to see how different NGOs came up and different institutions, CBOs, civil society, they came up and took this matter in their own hands. And we're all trying in our different ways to resolve the issue of gender-based violence. And it's even more amazing to see different donors who are willing to support this issue. What I just like to urge other people in the civil sector society is if you do get this money to resolve the issue of gender-based violence, then please put it into gender-based violence, not in your pocket.
Put it in that better use. And it's sad, Nima. I want to believe these are the same people who've been elected to represent these people in the society. And
Yeah.
if they tend to do such a great thing, it's such a disgrace in our society. So thank you very much. This live broadcast is brought to you by Elimu Care in partnership with Connexus. And so we are here to talk more about combating gender-based violence in a pandemic. And our guest tonight is Nimer Kassim. And Nimer Kassim is the founder of this organization that has received so much uploads from the viewers online. We have Radio Kaya, I think the person using the account, is saying the hijab mentorship program is doing an awesome job in sensitizing the community on fighting against GBV, though it's not an easy task and all stakeholders should get involved. Thank you very much. And those are the real insights that we really want in this society. Thanks so much, Esha Mohammed, Farida Ali, who was supposed to be the host tonight. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we wish you a quick recovery. Don Apple Jaka, who is tuned from Kochi, India. It's a timely discussion, and we really need this with us. We have Cedric Kayeka, KK Cedric, great conversation, and is tuned in from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to this session. We are 29 minutes past 7 p.m. East Africa time, and we want to go ahead in this discussion with our guest tonight. And so, what things should be done differently in our society, Ms. Nimer, to ensure that we promote and have advocacy at its best against gender-based violence? especially
For
in
me,
pandemic. Yes, in a pandemic.
sorry. For me, I always say there's so much you can do as one person, and there's so much more we can do together. So, a lot of times we usually sit down and say, "Oh, NGOs will handle that," or the government is the one who will handle that. It's their responsibility, or CBOs should handle that. It's their responsibility. But the fight against gender-based violence shouldn't be a fight for one person. It should be a fight for all of us, which I think is why Radio Kaya even insisted all stakeholders need to be involved. So the question comes down to who is the stakeholder? Even me and you as stakeholders, because you know what? we we have sisters, we have mothers, we have brothers, young brothers. We don't really know who could want to take advantage of them, and we're not really assured of their safety. So then this makes us a stakeholder, because you know what? We have shares in this community, shares that our people, shares that our families, our friends, and everyone around us. So it's our responsibility to come together and invest in this. I'm talking about your money. It doesn't have to be money, because a lot of times people think it's just money. Sometimes it's just volunteering your service. Like, if you're watching this, ask yourself, why don't I volunteer for a Limu Care to help them in combating gender based violence? Why don't I volunteer with the hijab mentorship to help them in combating gender based violence? Okay, I have 1,000 bob. I can use this to buy masks for a Limu Care, so that when they go to the villages, or when they go to the communities trying to combat gender-based violence, it can come in handy for them. Just the simple things. Sometimes we have some of our community members who bring in even something as simple as water. Someone will bring you water and say, I know now we have to do a lot of hand washing, and the village you're going to, they probably don't have enough water. So please take this and use it, and it's going to be helpful towards you. Sometimes it's the simple things like sharing this conversation that's happening right now. Share it in your timeline, retweet, tag us, mention us. Just let's start this conversation, because in the end of the day, we're all involved in this, and we all need one another to handle this. I'm just going to say this out here, um, to NGOs, bigger NGOs, to support the small NGOs, to support the small CBOs, organizations, donors, support the small NGOs, support the small CBOs, support the people who are actually in grassroots. Because as people in grassroots who are actually trying to combat this issue, we face a lot of challenges. Every day is a different day. Every community, you have to come up with different strategies and different mechanisms to tackle it in a way that is suitable for that particular community. So the fight against gender based violence is not a fight for one person. We all have to come out and put all our arms and hands on deck to fight this monster, the same way we're trying to fight against COVID-19.
With the same spirit and with the same strength that you like to pass this message, there are those people who believe that gender-based violence, at its mention, it only implies to women being mistreated, being mishandled in a society. Can you try to remove such a perspective from some of us who are some of the viewers tonight, and those people will interact with this content later?
Yeah,
Is it only
sure.
for men
So
or women?
no, 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 no. Gender-based violence is for all. I'm sorry, first of all, if I made it seem like it's only for women, it's just because for my organization, women are our priority. Yeah, it's just like that. But yes, gender-based violence is not just happening to women. In fact, we've also received cases. We're also tackling cases of gender-based violence on men. The only problem we've seen in the society is that men are afraid to talk about their issues. And each time a man speaks about the abuse, there's a lot of stigmatization, because people are going to say, oh, he's weak. Also, his wife bet him up. He's weak. He's a weak man. He doesn't even deserve to be married to that woman. He can't even keep his house in, take care of his house. If a man came out and said, I was raped, it's going to be like, oh, how would you sit down and say that a woman raped you? A woman can't rape you. You should have enjoyed yourself. There are all these perspectives and myths surrounding gender-based violence that are not true. Gender-based violence can happen to anyone, a man, a woman, an adult, even a young child, which is very unfair. But then that's why also why we have to be very careful with our children. I remember My sister, each time her child will go out to play, each time he comes back, she would have to take a look at him, and each time she will make sure she's the one who washes her own child, just so that she can look and see if the baby is okay. Because this society is horrible. This society, the way society is changing, is just very monstrous. I don't even have words for that. So gender-based violence can happen to anyone, and gender-based violence is not just rape. It's not just being beaten. Even psychological abuse, even mental health abuse, even even the simple things that you don't regard as gender-based violence can also fall into gender-based violence. So there are very many categories of GBV, and we should all watch out as a society to make sure that you don't end up as a victim, or someone close to you is not a victim of gender-based violence.
Miss Nima Kassim, we're almost coming to the end of this discussion tonight, and
Mhm.
we don't want to bring it to an end before we get this perspective really okay. If there are those men who are watching this tonight and those who will interact with it later, what's your word out there for them, and what's your take to the society? How should they receive such men? Because there are those men who are undergoing GBV on a day-to-day basis, but they can't come out, just as you said. What's your word for such kind of men, and what's your word to the society who look down upon them?
First of all, I just want them to know that they're not alone. And yeah, I just want you to know you're not alone. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. But I also want you to know that unless you trust someone with this information, then it's hard for us as a society to help you. And yes, there is always a person out there who can help you. So just find a way. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to a Limu Care, or any person that you trust that is close to you, that you feel would help you to, just speak about it. The first step is usually to speak about it. We usually say we don't want to rush people to telling them, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this. The first question is for you to feel safe enough to say, this happened to me and this wasn't my fault. Because no, it was not your fault. If somebody is horrible out there, then we don't want you to sit down and think that that happened to you because you're a horrible person. Horrible things happen to good people too. So it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself for that. And know you're not alone. And that in case you need help, there are people out here like us who are willing to take you through the entire process and to be with you in this very challenging time of your life. And you're strong and you're brave and you can get through this. And for the society that are watching this, I want you to remember that men are human beings just like me and you. And as much as a society, we want to believe that men should be strong, they should, fight lions, kill dragons, and slay them all. But no, it's not as dramatic as they make it seem in the movies. But men are human beings, and just like us, we all need one another to survive, and we need to create a safe space for men to also be able to share such traumatic experiences. I don't want you to sit down and look at it from a third person perspective. I want you to sit down and consider, if this was my son and they were going through something like this, would I want them to
I feel.
speak to me about it? Would I want them to share about it? Would I want them to hide it and cry to sleep every day? Would I want them to blame themselves every night to a point that they drive themselves to suicide? That's just a question you need to ask yourself. But I'm sure if that was your son, you treat them better. So treat every man like he was your son.
Wow, treat that man. And this is a gender sensitive topic, and it touches across all gender, be it female or male, man or woman, everyone is involved. And so, as everyone is involved, let's all be involved in this fight against gender based violence, especially now that we are all in a pandemic. Now we are bringing it on 39 minutes past 7 p.m. East Africa time. And I'd like to get it from you on the last question tonight. Then you tell us your views on it. Ms. Nima Kassim, what have you done to ensure that there is a reduction in the gender-based violence cases in your region, in the country, and your involvement generally in the fight against this vice?
So for us, we're running different programs under the Generation Equality Project that we are working on at the moment. And the first priority or the first objective that we have is to raise awareness, because we've realized that some people are being abused, but they're not even aware that they're being abused. Or some people are abusing others, but they're not even aware that they are abusing others. So the first concept is to raise awareness of gender-based violence, for people to understand what gender-based violence is about, and that it's wrong, and that there are consequences for it, and that there is help available for it. So the first step is to raise awareness. We do this through advocacy forums, social media dialogues, and we go to the villages. We even have segments, community dialogues. So even our community dialogues are divided to youth dialogues. We have dialogues specifically for the youth to speak up and share. We have dialogues, intergenerational dialogues of people in different age groups to sit and speak about it. We have women dialogues, where women are provided with the safe spaces that they need to speak up and share. And even through that, we are able to meet different victims of gender based violence and take them through the safety plan process and help them get justice. Because we also have some that have they had their rights violated, and they have not yet gotten any justice. So we help them acquire justice through partnership with other organizations in the justice sphere. And we also do administrators training, the people who are handling cases of gender-based violence, the gender desk at the police station, the chiefs, the village administrators, the balozi wa nyumba kumi, the first person who the victims have to run to seek for help. Are they fully equipped with the knowledge that they need to tackle the situation? So we provide them with trainings and help them acquire the skills and knowledge that they need to strengthen the system and mechanisms of justice surrounding gender-based violence. We also have stakeholder engagements where with the stakeholders in the community, where we share with them the findings and see how we can make the situation better. How can we come up with better policies? How can we increase the budgetary allocation towards the issues of gender-based violence or issues of gender? How can we make it better? How as a community, as different stakeholders, are people in power, people who you can share your opinion and help us to fight this menace from the top. So we involve the stakeholders, and we also have media engagement with different TV stations, radio stations, to raise more awareness, because we believe that the media plays a very big role when it comes to advocacy. Like Radio Kaya is actually one of our partners, and they've really helped us in our advocacy, especially in underserved communities, because in our villages, more people have radios than more people have TVs. So, radio is always very effective. And social media dialogue, of course, for those of us who are privileged to own phones. So it's more about setting the conversation going and making sure that everyone has the opportunity. And most importantly, we provide service to victims of gender-based violence. At first, we used to provide them with to link them up with service providers, but then through our work, an American company and an organization, the Addis Clinic, were very impressed with what we are doing, and they decided to provide us with our own doctor who we will be working with, specializing in women and health, who we will be working with. We are currently actually in the process of receiving applications. So if you're watching this and you work in the sphere of women and health and you'd like to work with us, please send in your application. Just check out our page and send in your application to the Addis Clinic, and we would love to have the best in the team, so we can provide better service to these women in underserved communities.
Wow, wow. You've seen the amazing work that Miss Nimer Kassim is running down there at the coast. And we really know and we hope this will cover the whole country and we'll be bringing this vice to an end. Before we bring this discussion to an end tonight, we want to go through some of the feedback that we have online. And we have Riziki Bakari. Study has it that in the midst of a pandemic, GBV cases rise, leave alone day-to-day cases of the same, meaning it's an issue of constant resolve. Yes, and that's what we really need to get from that and this conversation that we've had tonight. Farida Ali, that's the founder Elimu Care, and tonight she's joining us on Facebook. Anasema, indeed, it has been an eye-opening conversation which has brought the reality of GBV being a timely topic. Thank you very much, Farida Ali and Peter Georges. Thank you, everyone who found time to join us on this live session tonight. And so we say thank you so much, Miss Mina Kassim, if I get that right again, the founder, the Hijabi Mentorship Program. And thanks so much for all our viewers who found time to join us in this live discussion. Remember to follow the Elimu Care page on Facebook so that you can catch more of these live sessions as long as we'll be here in partnership with Connexus. We say thank you so much, and nisaidie kupaza sauti. Let's help lift each other back there in the society to bring this vice of gender-based violence to an end. I've been your host for tonight, Cleophas Oluoch. Have yourself a blessed night, and thanks for joining.
Thank you.